Good morning. So like our attendance today is 71. Last Sunday we had 59. A year ago today we had 79. Do we have anyone that has had a birthday or an anniversary and wishes to contribute to the birthday bank this morning?
Anniversary on Wednesday.
Birthday today. Happy birthday. Anniversary on Wednesday and a birthday today. Very good. Did I miss anyone? Okay, just today here at the church, we sent out one card, and we sent a card to Glenn McCollum. They said he is having some issues, and I think they said he was at Boone, is that right? Right now, he's at Boone. They hope to get him back to Macon, to the nursing center there at Macon. So anyway, we sent him a card. We have an offering right after church, and that will be for Approaching Grace Ministry, so we'll take that out right after church. It says a brief meeting for all Vacation Bible School volunteers will be after this morning's service, so meet right after services for that. There will be a baby shower, which is next Saturday, and that is for Cheyenne and Aaron Solar and their baby girl at the Buckland Community Building at 1 o'clock in Buckland on Saturday, May 11th. Okay, do we have any more announcements? Okay, I have one more deal. It says we have several graduates here. Congratulations to our high school graduates, Charity Coward, Cadence King, Gunnar Lomberg, and Billy Richards. And congratulations to our college graduates, Ashton Lee, which she's graduating from Truman State University, Bachelor of Science degree in psychology and with a minor in biology. Where is Ashton? Is she here?
She's in Kirksville today.
She's in Kirksville today, okay. And then we have our college graduates, which is, that's what I'm working on. Billy Richards, Rockhurst University, associate degree in liberal arts. Congratulations to all of them. Congratulations. Okay, the Christians Women meeting will be this Thursday at 1:30. Hostess will be Melba Belzer, and I guess Melba is also doing the lesson. Is that right?
There, Rob.
Well, I'm not sure, but that's what it is. Anyway, that's that. Anyway, they'll take care of it. Oh. Well, Carol Jameson's with, I
Are you
think.
doing the lesson?
You read it wrong, Larry.
Well, it's scratched out on mine, so I don't know. Anyway, you ladies take care of it.
They just traded months.
Okay, they traded months? Okay, whatever. All right, do we have any more announcements this morning? I'm just reading what's on my paper up here. Anything else? If there is nothing further, I will turn the service over to Mike. The youth group will meet on the 5th, and that'll be at Mike and Debbie's house.
How many of you believe that work is important? How many of you know that the Bible talks a lot about work? I remember when I was a young boy, that one summer I walked into the house and I made a terrible mistake. I told my mother I was bored. And that day I was introduced to work. Several hours later, I understood that if I ever was bored, I would never share it with her again. Do any of you ever know anybody that's lazy? Do we have any problems with that in our world today? Yeah, don't be pointing. I want to talk today about what the Bible has to share with us when it comes to work. When it comes to work. I sometimes protested working when I was a kid, and yet Dad made me do it anyway. But thinking back on my life, some of the greatest times I ever had was working side by side with my father. He taught me how things work. He showed me how to fix things. And he taught me that, yes, it's hot, yes, it's cold, but we have a job to do. And even though I was a city kid, I remember even early on when it's time to mow the lawn, and Dad didn't trust me with that yet, but he would send me out and say, pick up all the toys in the yard, the sticks and the rocks and all of the other things that you find. And learning how to work is something that is amazing. Like I said, I sometimes protested, but there's something about working together that enhances relationships. And God created man for fellowship with him. That's why he created us. He wanted us to have fellowship with him, to be united with him in various things. The Lord God took the man that he'd made, put him in the Garden of Eden, to work it and to take care of it. And we find that in Genesis, the 2nd chapter, verse 15. And God planted the garden, and the man, Adam, was to cultivate it. And by doing that, they shared in the work. God planted it, and Adam was to work it. Now, we all know the rest of the story, what happened when Adam and Eve sinned. And we often think that God looked at that and he says, all right, I'll teach you a lesson. You're going to have to work the rest of your life. Well, man was working before sin came into the world. And work is not necessarily a bad thing. But work can actually be a fun thing if it's something you enjoy. The problem that happened to us is because of sin is God introduced things like grief and weeds and thistles and thorns and things never going right, the tractor breaking down or whatever. That was all part of the curse that God gave man. Before that, it wasn't like that. The Bible makes it clear that God considers laziness a sin, a rejection of his offer of fellowship. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 26 and verse 16, it says, the sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who answer discreetly. Oh, yeah. Isn't that the truth? The guy that never does anything, he can tell you how it should be done. And he can sit around and drink coffee and so on and say, yeah, if I was going to do that, I would do it this way or that way. And the guy's never done much. And Solomon, he observed a lot about life. And one of the things he observed is that the person that had all the answers really hadn't done much. He goes on and says, a lazy hands makes a man poor, but diligent hands bring wealth. He who gathers crops in summer is a wise son, but he who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son. In Proverbs 10 and verse 4 and 5. Well, that's also true. If you don't do the work, you're not going to get the harvest, and it doesn't look good for you. And you're going to have to borrow, beg, or steal from someone else to live life. And by the one talent man, you remember the story that Jesus told about the master that went away and gave his servants different talents, 5, 10, various talents. One, he gave 1 talent. To the man who had 1 talent and buried his talent and refused to work, Jesus called him a wicked, lazy servant. And we see that, and it was Jesus that said that in Matthew 25 and verse 26. Now, in our society, we often do not call lazy people wicked today. We might say something like they have a low leisure level, but we don't call them wicked. But the Apostle Paul said this. He said this, and this was sent to the church in Thessalonica. He says, if a man does not work, neither should he what? Eat. And that all came from the fact that they had somehow come to the conclusion that Jesus was going to come any minute, which was a good thing to feel. But the problem is some of the people, they said, well, I'm just going to quit my job. I'm just going to sit out here on the hill. I'm going to bring a sandwich, and I'm going to wait for Jesus to come. And then pretty soon, guess what? He didn't come. And it's been a few years ago. And they got hungry. And so they started borrowing from their neighbors and from people in the church. And after a while, they got to be a little bit of a problem. And the people in the church that were trying to help them, they had nothing either. And Paul just said to them, listen, guys, if a man will not work, neither should he eat. And that's a hard lesson to learn. One man received a trophy for being the laziest man in town. He was really proud of this trophy. And his friend said to him, "How did you get this award?" Well, another friend said, "Old Bill over there, he whittled all day long, every day." "But don't a lot of men in town whittle a lot?" He said, "Yeah, but old Bill, he uses an electric knife, you know. He was that lazy." What do you call a lazy kangaroo? A pouch potato. Sorry. A pouch potato. But God is not pleased with a man or a woman who is lazy. Genesis introduces us to God who works. The Bible tells us that for 6 days God labored, creating the universe. In Genesis 2:2, it relates that on the seventh day, God finished his work and rested. And God was not tired. God did not need a break, but there was a temporary change of pace in his activity. Now God, he took some time off with creating the world, and then that seventh day he rested, and he used that for man so that we would not become workaholics too. You know, there's two ends of this scale. There's the one person that won't work and doesn't intend to, and then there's the other people that's all they do. And they neglect their family, and they neglect the church, and they neglect everything because they're workaholics. And God knew that if he didn't set up this as a necessary rule for the people, that they would never take time to rest. And there's nothing wrong with a little rest time. And that's why the Sabbath day was instituted by God, so that they wouldn't work and work and work. And, you know, we need some reflection time, don't we? We need some time to look around and take time to ask ourselves, why am I here? Where am I going? What's going to be my lot after death? We need time. And so that's what happened. But God is at work today. Did you know that? God is at work. He's sustaining his creation. He keeps this whole universe going. Scientists can't figure it out. How come the world doesn't just fly into the sun? What is gravity? Where does it come from? You know, well, where does weather come from and all this? God is working. He's also working to restrain evil. Now, the Bible tells us that he is holding back the possible evil that could come our way, but that at some point that would be let go a little bit, and we're starting to see that, where evil is becoming more and more pronounced in our world, and we're seeing a lot of what's happened to our society because of evil. And God is also working, even at this very moment, to save mankind. We are living in the last days, and these are the days that people can still be saved. They can still turn their destiny around and live with God forever in heaven. And he's working through his church and through his people even now. God is an active God. Jesus even said this, "My Father is always at work at this very day, and I too am working," in John 5 and verse 17. When Jesus was 12 years old, he said, "I must be about my Father's business." He understood that. Ran across, well, I received a phone call actually yesterday. And you've heard me talk a little bit about my memories of my days in Council Bluffs with hospice. Well, I received a phone call. I called him back, and a little secretary picked up the phone. She's the one that I gave the name SpongeBob to. And I said, "Is this SpongeBob?" She laughed, and she said, "Yeah, Mike." I said, "Did you call me?" She said, "Yes. I have some bad news for you." I said, "What's that?" She said, "I wanted you to hear it from me," but she said, "We had to close down the hospice office in Council Bluffs after all those years." And I said, "What was the deal?" She said, "We had lots of people wanting our service, and we had a lot of need, but we couldn't get any nurses to work for us for various reasons." You know, and there was an article that I read just not too long ago that goes like this. And it was kind of written right after the pandemic time with the COVID thing. And many of you can relate to this. It says, "Her eyes were sad and close to brimming with tears as she served my friend and me for one last time. Her cuisine had been voted the best in a 4-state area several times. The meal, as always, was delicious. But Christmas Eve would be her last day to be open. Why? The workforce has killed us, she said. Sadly, no one wants to work. And this sad story is being repeated over and over all over America. Now hiring, signs are everywhere, but no one wants to work. Elections do have consequences. Socialism is a deadly disease, and millions would rather receive handouts from the government than go to work. Man went to a pet store. He was looking for a dog. His other dog got run over by a bus. Sad. It was real sad. And as he walked into the pet store, he walked by the first cage, and it's a little dog there. It looked like a mutt, but it had a price tag of $500. He turned to the owner and he said, $500 for this dog? He says, is there something special about this dog? And the guy said, yeah, this dog is really a good dog. He'll keep the critters away from your house, and then when the morning comes, he can run the computer. He said, wow, that's very unusual. Went to the next cage, and there was a sign for $1,000, and he said, wow, tell me about this dog. He said, well, this is a very special dog. This dog can bring in the cows, and then when he's done, he can run a skid steer, and it's really, really a nice dog. He said, that is remarkable. He doesn't even have opposing thumbs, and he can still, yes, he can. And so then he came to the next cage, and it said $2,000, and he looked in this cage, and there's this dog there, and he said, wow, I can't wait to hear, what does this dog do? He said, really? He said, I have never seen that dog do anything, but he says the other 2 dogs call him boss. So I figured he must be worth something. Solomon was an interesting man, and he noticed life a lot. And he noticed many things about life. God had given him supernatural wisdom, and God had blessed him with that. In fact, it's interesting when you read in the scriptures that people would actually come from all over the world to hear the wisdom of this man. And he would sit down, and he would talk about whatever they wanted to know. Talk about nature. Oh yeah, he could talk about vines and botany and plants, and talk about animals and all of these things. He noticed human nature. In fact, he was trying to find out what the purpose of man really was and what would make man happy. And at the end of his studies and his searching, he basically said, in the end of the Ecclesiastes, I finally found out what the purpose of man is, and that is to fear God and keep his commandments. But he wrote something in Proverbs 6 that I want to take a look at this morning. In Proverbs 6, he wrote about this. In chapter 6, verse 6, it says, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. And Solomon is saying to the man who would not work, or the lady, you need to go look at this anthill over here and just watch it for a while. You notice anything? Are those ants laying around? They're always busy. Have any of you noticed? And they're walking by with your sandwich at your picnic, get 6 or 7 of them together, and there it goes. And they're storing up for another time. And they're taking care of the queen, and they're taking care of provisions, and they're working, and they're running off the enemies. They're always busy. And he said to the sluggard, they don't have a boss. There's not a boss ant out there with a whip. They don't have a time clock. But by nature, God has made these little insects very, very industrious. And so then he goes on in verses 9 through 11. It says, how long will you lie there, you sluggard? Well, he likes that name, doesn't he? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And poverty will come on you like a bandit, and scarcity like an armed man. And so he's saying to them, there are certain people that just can't get started in the morning. They just can't get started. You know, the snooze the snooze button on their alarm clock is almost all wore off. Because, I mean, they just turn over and hit that thing again. And they just can't get up. They can't get up. You know, I tried that when I was a kid at home. They didn't have snooze buttons then, but my mother was an anti-snooze button. And she would say, "Get up, it's time to go to school." "Oh man, I'm so tired. I couldn't sleep all night last night. I'm just now getting the best sleep I've had in several days." She said, "Well, good, remember it for 5 seconds and get up, you gotta go to school." "I don't feel good." "Well, you'll feel good if you get up and get around." And I knew I was kind of not really telling her all the truth, but I did figure out that it was her deal, that she wanted me to get up in the morning and get going. And, you know, and I've often thought to myself, we really aren't teaching our kids a lot when we say something like, "All right, 1, 2, 3, and we're teaching, actually the child is teaching us that we don't have to listen to mom until she starts saying 1, 2, 3, 4. And the kid's just sitting there, you know, thinking, when's she going to get to 10? Then I'm going to be a naughty little kid anyway, you know. And don't get me wrong, I was a kid myself, and I pushed the boundaries like you wouldn't believe. Some of the, I read about Franklin Graham. You know who Franklin Graham was? He is an amazing Christian man, and his father, of course, was an incredible man, Billy Graham, and his mama was Anne Graham. And in one of his writings, he talked about how that his mother could never get him up in the morning. He'd lock his door, he'd put a dresser up against it, whatever, and she'd knock on it, and he would just put the pillow over his head and just ignore her. Billy Graham's son? Yeah, Billy Graham's son. But you know what Anne did? She didn't say, "Oh, well, you know, I can't make this kid mine." She crawled out on the roof with a big old pail of water. He had a window. It wasn't real ladylike. She opened his window, and she doused him with a pail of water, and he was sputtering and coming up out of that. And she said, "I said, young man, it's time to get up." Do you think he got the news? At least that day. He got that day. But you know, lazy students are always late to the first hour of class, if they make it at all. And every morning it's a battle to get out of bed. Individual might go to church at St. Mattress on Sunday morning. And that is something that Solomon noticed. And then in Proverbs 12 and verse 27, we read this: "The lazy man does not roast his game." So that's found in Proverbs 12 and verse 27. And Solomon said that a lazy person seldom finishes anything. Seldom finishes. They like hunting. It's fun to kill it. But when it comes to skinning it and field dressing it or whatever, just let it rot. You know? And Solomon says they like the fun, but they don't like the work. And that was something he noticed clear all those years ago. Their basements are full of unfinished projects. You know, they've got this boat that's half built, and they have this old car out in the garage that they're going to restore. And the kids, when they have the funeral for mom and dad, they're still there, you know, still unfinished. And so often in our lives, that's kind of what happens when we don't realize that God does not like laziness. In Ecclesiastes 10, in verse 18, it says, "If a man is lazy, the rafters sag, and if his hands are idle, the house leaks." Interesting, Solomon. Did you notice that? Very wise observation. It's kind of like the guy that his roof leaked, and he said, "I can't fix the roof right now because it's raining." And then it was sunny out the next day or two, and he said, "I can't fix the rain now. No reason to fix it now because there's no water coming in." And that's kind of the attitude. They never finish anything. When you come to Jesus, this is not a sprint. When you come to the Lord, it's a marathon that lasts your entire life. If you've committed your life to Jesus, then you are part of his kingdom, and he is depending upon you. I told my boss that there were 3 companies that were after me, actually 4 companies, and that I needed a raise to stay at my job. And so we haggled for a few minutes, and he gave me a 5% raise. Leaving his office, he stopped and he asks me, by the way, which companies are after you? I said, the gas, the electric, the water, and the cable company. They're all after me. Why? Well, isn't that the way it works sometimes? Well, he's also full of excuses. We're all full of excuses. You know, I would rather demonstrate at my college than go to class, and since mom and dad is sending me here with a huge stipend with all the money I need, then I'm just going to do this. I never had time to do stuff like that. I was always having to work, because if I didn't work, I didn't eat, or I didn't have a place to live. And I'm not patting myself on the back, because I could have worked harder and I could have done more. But we have a lot of problems in our world because we've not valued work in our society. Third characteristic of a lazy person, he has an excuse for everything. In Proverbs 22 and verse 13, it says, the sluggard says, there's a lion outside. Well, now, that excuse may not work here in this area. I can't go to work because I might get eaten by a lion on Main Street of Winnegan. Back in those days, there probably were some lions. And he also says, I will be murdered in the streets. There's always an excuse not to work. It's a jungle out there, maybe. It's Friday, and everybody takes off Friday afternoon. Oh, it's Monday, and no one buys on Monday. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's too just right. I've got to be careful not to burn out. Oh, I've heard that one before. I tell you, I'm pushing it. I might just burn out. I might burn out. I had a professor in Bible college who had a saying that he often said. He said, I would rather wear out than rust out for God. And that's exactly what happened to Brother Donald G. Hunt. One day he was getting his suitcase out of the trunk of his car, getting ready for another revival meeting with his wife, Margaret. He had done that at my house many, many times when he stayed with us. And all of a sudden he said, Margaret. And he had died of a heart attack right there, working for God. And he was probably, I don't remember how old Brother Hunt was, in his 80s somewhere. Well, we might just burn out. Well, you might just rust out too. There's a recession, so there's no one trying now. I need to spend time with my nephew. I need to stay home tonight and rearrange the sock drawer. We have all kinds of excuses. The sluggard can find 100 excuses not to work, but he seldom says this: I don't feel like working today, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I wonder how many of you have felt that way over the years. I don't feel like it today. I would rather call in sick or call in tired. That didn't ever work. Call in tired, call in sick, at least you can, I don't think I'm going to make it today. When you call in tired, you go, well, that doesn't work too well. Boss will say, well, get lots of rest. You'll be looking for a job tomorrow. But we do things even when we don't feel like it. Do you think Jesus felt like going to the cross? No, he didn't. We know that for a fact. He didn't want to do that. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about something else. Why work is good for us. It builds our self-esteem. Think about this. God wants us to work to enhance our self-esteem. It says this in Ecclesiastes 3:13, that everyone may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all his toil, This is the gift of God. Find satisfaction in your toil. You may not have a lot. You may not have very much money. You might have a family to take care of and mouths to feed, and you do your very best. You work the best you can. You put food on the table, and you work as hard as you can, and you go to bed at night tired with a smile on your face, knowing that you did something with your hands that day. That's called self-esteem. You might notice that even in the church. Little kids will come up from downstairs and they'll have something they made. You may not know what it is. It might look like a donkey or mixed with a kangaroo with colors over here and that, and tape is hanging on their shirt. But they've got it and they're so proud of it. Look what I made. And then they'll give it to mom so that she can hang on to it until they go home. But they're proud of that. Any of you ever been proud of something you did? You built something. Maybe you were a carpenter, and 20 years from now, you drive down that street and you say to your grandkids, I want to stop here. You see that big old house right there? I built that. You feel good. Why? You know how long it took you to do that. The self-esteem is amazing. And God says that. And do you see a man skilled in his work? The Bible says he will serve before kings. He will not serve before obscure men. Proverbs 22:29. And that doesn't mean that every skilled worker will be called to the White House, but there is a sense of honor and dignity that results from legitimate work. Work well done. And give it your best. It's one of the things that they often talk about, some of the cathedrals in Europe, is that there's a lot of stuff underneath the roof in places that no one will ever see that are perfect. Little figurines and things of that nature. And somebody asked a craftsman one time and says, why did you put so much effort into that? A man will never see that. And he says, yeah, but I know. And God sees it. And God sees you. And he sees what you are doing. And it's easy to get discouraged with anything. Let's say, for example, church. It's easy to get discouraged in church because there's not many people one week or whatever. But you realize that God has told you, you are my servant, and you be faithful to me. And I know where you're at, and I know your heart. And it's kind of like when Peter and John were standing there, and Jesus was telling Peter how he was going to die after his resurrection, and he was standing there and reinstating him and saying, go feed my lambs. And then Jesus told Peter how he was going to die. And Peter at that moment turned and looked at John and says, what about him? And Jesus said, if I want him to live until I come again, what's that to you, Peter? What's that to you? You serve me. You follow me. And poor old Noah, he was out there building on that old boat, and took over 100 years to do it, 120, they say. And at the same time, the book of Hebrews and other places said that he preached, and no one listened. And he could have gotten discouraged, and God says, what's that to you, Noah? What's that to you? Pick up another nail, grab another board, and you be faithful to me. And that's what God tells us to do. But work has a tendency to be that way. When I get depressed, I can usually trace it to one of two things. Either my feelings have been hurt, or I feel guilty because I haven't worked as hard as I think I should. And nothing gets me out of depression quicker than putting my hand to a task and getting something accomplished. And that's the way it is with life. God created us with a certain emotional need that are going to be met only by an honest day's work. And there's a sense of accomplishment and self-respect that can only come from the satisfaction of a job well done. But in closing, I want to tell you this. But there's a shortage of workforce in another realm that concerns me even more. And I am talking about workers in the church, laborers in the kingdom of God, and reapers in the harvest. A lot of work to be done. 2,000 years ago, Jesus recognized this work shortage when he declared, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Therefore, plead with the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. And Jesus said that in Matthew 9:37 and 38. This is an urgent prayer request that Jesus said, even back in his day, there's more work than there are people. And it's the same now. This should be in our prayer requests every week. And I remember a challenging song from my college days that we used to sing. It was, some of you might know this song. It was Go Into the Field. It goes like this. The first stanza says, stand no longer idle, heed the call. Go to work for Jesus, one and all. Fields are waiting for your hands today. Take up your sickle and speed away. A lot of work. The second stanza says this, Jesus will reward for what you do. He sees. Life's fair crown of glory give to you. Won't that be a day when we get that from the hands of Jesus? Perfect rest when ends life's little day, and life is a little day. It's a very short day. Life is very short. I've only been here for a few years, and already I've seen several beautiful, beautiful saints of God that have gone to their rest. It's very short. Reapers, get ready and speed away. And then the refrain or the chorus says this, go into the field, gather in the yield. Labor for the Lord, gain the great reward. Reapers, the hours are speeding. Jesus, your help is needing. Shall he call in vain? Go into the field, reap the golden yield. Heed his loving plea. True to Jesus be. You know, right now it's not real popular to be in love with Jesus. Love for the master showing. When you serve Jesus, it shows. Love for him. Work while the sun is glowing. You can't work at night. Jesus said, work while it is day. The night comes when no man can work. Gather now the grain. Gather now the golden grain. Well, the Bible does talk about work, doesn't it? That and a whole lot more that we didn't discuss. But I want to sing our closing song. See if I can find it. 481 in your blue book. 481. We're going to have some baptisms next Sunday. It's Mother's Day. And so the baptistry is going to be full and hopefully warm. And if there's anyone else that is thinking about coming to Christ and giving your life to him, you come next Sunday. Bring some clothes, bring some towels, and we'll get her done because we're going to be ready. And don't put it off. 281 is what we're, or 481 as we stand together. 481.